Hi guys, welcome back TV Spoilers, revealing the drama that will unfold on Tuesday, bringing excitement to the fake character. Revealing the confusion, Sharon Sharp tries to prevent the relationship between Daniel and Mariah. Sharon warns Daniel about the consequences for Mariah, and Aria Sharon confronts Daniel, frankly warning him that pursuing Tessa will deeply hurt Mariah, who is already very vulnerable, and negatively impact Aria, Daniel's niece. Sharon will ask Daniel a quick survey question about his feelings. Since Daniel and Tessa have had many intimate moments together at the cafe recently, Sharon may admit that she has found the relationship between them growing stronger. Sharon knew that Mariah had deeply hurt Tessa by pushing her away. The pain became unbearable for Tessa, till she eventually decided to file for divorce. Sharon understood all too well that cracks in a family would never appear through loud words. We started with silences that lasted longer than usual, with averted gazes, with emotions suppressed for so long that no one could distinguish between weariness, grief, and the harbinger of an irreparable crisis. Therefore, when she realized the increasingly undeniable connection between Daniel and Tessa, Sharon could no longer remain a passive observer like a mother waiting for things to work themselves out. She knew that if she continued to remain silent, that silence would not be a sign of worry, but complicity. And for Sharon, at a time when Mariah was too fragile, Tessa too wary, and Aria too young to understand why the world around her was spinning, any number of choices she had become the cause of a new tragedy. The crimson lights at that moment still held their familiar peacefulness, but that peace only made the impending confrontation more suffocating. The tables, the smell of coffee, the soft light, and the everyday life of the pub could not alleviate the heavy feeling weighing on Sharon. She entered not with impulsive anger, but with a cold and clear determination. A determination that only appears when a woman has thought too much, considered too carefully, and finally understands that she has the power to say what no one wants to hear. She sought Daniel not to condemn him completely, nor to control his life. What Sharon really wanted was to force Daniel to confront the entire system of what he was doing that was dragging him down, before anything but repair was possible. Seeing Daniel, Sharon felt even more acutely the complexity of the situation. He didn't seem to have the smugness of someone trying to interfere in a crumbling marriage, nor the carefree attitude of someone unaware of their own predicament. It was precisely the unwavering resolve that worried Sharon. Daniel wasn't a bad person, and sometimes it's those with no ill intentions who inflict the deepest wounds, believing that as long as their heart didn't intentionally do wrong, the consequences would be less severe. But Sharon knew life didn't work that way. Feelings, especially those born of compassion when others are at their weakest, aren't harmless just because they begin with empathy. Sharon got straight to the point, without beating around the bush, not letting the conversation drift into meaningless pleasantries. She reminded Daniel that what was happening between him and Tessa, however he called it comfort, connection, or a feeling of being understood, was essentially a force that could sustain a family already struggling to the brink. She didn't deny that Tessa was hurting, that Mariah had exhausted Tessa with months of secrecy, withdrawal, and leaving her partner to bear everything alone. Sharon also didn't deny that Daniel might have been timely anchor, when Tessa needed a listener, when she was left alone in a house with too much responsibility and too little warmth. But Sharon understood that a new connection formed while an older relationship was absorbing power that didn't make it any brighter. On the contrary, it made everything more dangerous, because all the emotions at that time were the basic colors of business, loneliness, and disorientation. Daniel remained with a heavy expression, carrying with him the first true realization that the intimacy he had allowed himself to enter was no longer his private matter. It had become a knot in a much larger network than he had ever wanted to acknowledge. Sharon left with a chilling premonition. While she had just managed a dramatic slip, she might have also inadvertently presented herself with moments of greater choice than ever before. Somewhere behind it all, Mariah's fragile fate, Tessa's wariness, and Aria's innocence hung precariously on a tightrope so strong that one wrong step would mean no one could control the situation anymore. Sharon herself faced a painful paradox. She knew that intervening might be the right thing to do, but she also knew that every time a mother gets involved in her child's private affairs, things risk become more complicated. However, this was no longer the time to fear being misunderstood. Between being seen as controlling and watching Mariah sink deeper into instability, Sharon chose the former without hesitation. Because she'd rather be accused of interfering than live with the feeling of having seen disaster approaching and remain silent.